Welcome to Cloud Plus, your source for exclusive videos and online events for AWS professionals. My name is Michael, and today I show you in this live event a little tool that I developed over the last couple of days that turns any CloudFormation template into the required IAM permissions to deploy the stack. So let me give you a quick demo of how the tool works, and then we'll look at all the details. So what I can do with this little tool is I enter any CloudFormation template I wish, I click on the submit button, and the result is the list of all the IAM permissions. And as you can see, I deploy a couple of things here in this stack that are required to roll out this stack. So that's what the tool can do. It turns a CloudFormation template into the required permissions to actually deploy it. So that's it. This is how the tool works. But now let's revisit why this is actually something important, at least from my point of view. So let me share one of the IAM roles with you that we use here to deploy cloudonow.io, so the main website. As you can see, this is all done with CloudFormation, and we have an IAM role, and our GitHub pipeline assumes this role, and with this permissions, it deploys cloudonow.io. And as you can see, the permissions in this role are not really following the least privilege principle, because we grant permissions on a service level. So for example, we allow this role to do whatever it wishes to do with the CloudFront service, with the CloudFormation service, with Route 53, S3, Lambda, IAM, and so on and so forth. So this is, I think, better than most of the permissions of pipelines that I see, which are most often just the star kind of permission. So the pipeline has all permissions, which makes it a very, I would say, interesting target for an attacker, because if you get somehow access to the credentials of the pipeline, then you are kind of in control of the AWS account. And if you use stuff like GitHub Actions, where you basically include actions from other people that you might not really trust, then this is super important, because you don't really know what this GitHub action that you include in your pipeline is actually doing with your environment variables, for example. So that's why this is important. So until recently, making sure that CloudFormation only has the permission that it really needs was very, very painful. There was no documentation. Okay, if CloudFormation deploys an S3 bucket, it needs this and that permission. So this is not available in the AWS documentation. So the option that you had was trial and error. Start with no permissions and then add permissions until CloudFormation is happy. Problem is, you need different permissions when you create a stack compared to when you update it. And also when you delete it, you need new permissions. For some resources, you need different permissions depending on what properties you fill. So this is a lot of work, and it is basically impossible to achieve. So that's the problem. And as you can, I think, understand, there wasn't a really good solution. And the game doesn't change if you use Terraform. It's still kind of the same problem. So when I was preparing the CloudFormation Modules video that you saw last week, I had a look not only at CloudFormation Modules, but also at resource providers. And we wrote a little blog post about that a couple of weeks ago. This is basically the new way to create a custom resource. And the cool thing about those resource providers is that they come with a specific schema. So let me quickly show you how this looks like. So there are a couple of options to get access to the resource provider schemas. So I think the most convenient option is to go to this website. I will paste the link into the chat and select the region of choice. So in some regions, not all services are available. That's why the schema is different for the regions. But I mean, for the most popular services, they are more or less the same. And you can just download this file, and it's a big zip file. And what you get is something like this. And I open an example here for the ECS service. So this is what a schema of a resource provider looks like. So you can see the CloudFormation type here at the top. So this kind of identifies, okay, what resource this is about. Then we have a bunch of definitions. So let me expand that, sorry for that. So this is kind of just defining the model, like the structures that are needed. Then we have the properties. So this is what we specify in CloudFormation as properties. So for example, the service on is a string. Capacity provider strategy, okay, that's actually a complex type. And in this case, it's actually an array of complex types. So it references a definition and so on and so forth. So that's all super useful, not important for me. The thing that I was interested in is what we have in the handlers section. And as you can see, here we have for different like steps during the life cycle. So this is during create, this is during update, this is during delete, and then we have read and list, and that's somehow used for example, things like drift detection. But what we have here is a list of the IAM permissions needed for that step. And that is actually the information that we need. So that's the documentation I was looking for so long. So my idea was I could just use this information and I kind of turn it around a little bit, apply it to a CloudFormation template, and what I get is a list of all the permissions that I require to deploy this thing. So that's super useful. So let's look again at the tool that I created. So let me switch into the browser again. So I will insert another CloudFormation template here. So the one that I used is more or less an easier one. So I paste in a bigger one. So those are is a template from our CloudFormation templates repository. So a real world template. It's nothing that I created just for this demo. And I click the submit button. And again, I get on the left side all the required IAM permissions. And that's nice. And as you can see, I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff already added here. But there is also information on the right-hand side of the tool. And that's actually where it gets a little bit more complicated. So turns out not all the AWS CloudFormation resources have a schema defined as a resource provider. Turns out actually most of them don't have such a schema available. So as you can see, Route 53 record set not supported, network interface not supported, security group ingress not supported, and so on and so forth. So the list goes on. So that is actually a problem. So I played around a little bit with this tool, and for most of my templates, unfortunately, the coverage was around 20-25%. So I will send a link to the tool into the chat. So if you're interested, you can try it out with your own templates. YAML templates work, JSON should work as well, so feel free to experiment with it. But I assume that it will not cover all the resources that you use. So that's the first problem of the tool. So I was a little bit disappointed about that. So it's the like kind of the same story with AWS. They release something, it's more kind of, I mean, in this case, I would say it's more than 20% done, not really 80% done, but yeah, it really lacks a lot of information. Of course, we can hope that this will change in the future, so the tool will get more powerful over time. So let me insert another template. So this is my last example. So what's that? I think it's, oh yeah, that's the static website template. And that had actually quite good coverage. As you can see, the only thing missing is the S3 bucket policy and the CloudFront origin access identity resource. So that's pretty cool. So all the S3 stuff is in there. As you can see, you need quite a lot of permissions to deploy an S3 bucket. And that's what I said at the beginning. So for example, if you enable versioning, you will need these permissions. If you don't enable it in the resource, you don't need the permissions, but I mean, we don't really know. So this tool is not very clever. It's just like if you deploy an S3 bucket, it will just add all those permissions here, which is, I think, good enough to solve the problem. All right, so this is how the tool works. Feel free to experiment with it. And now we will look a little bit into the code base. So how does it actually work? So the first challenge, of course, is to convert all the information from the schema registry into something that is like usable by the tool. So basically what I have here is a big map where I map all the AWS, the resource types into the list of IAM permissions. So as you can see, the first ones have good coverage, but then there are things like an MQ broker. and there are no permissions defined here. So this is basically a resource type that is not that has not specified the permissions in the schema registry. So this means we cannot really support that resource. So that's the problem. And as you can see, there are quite a few who don't have any information. And there are also, if you look into more the more popular services, as you can see here, this is all in the EC2 VPC space. I mean, there are lots of stuff. There's lots of things missing. So DynamoDB table is missing as well. So that's a resource that I use quite often. So as you can see, that's not ideal. So that's why I added what I call overrides. So this is basically where we as humans have to do some work. So for all the stuff that's not yet supported by the schema registry, we could define our own list of permissions. And this then basically is back to the trial and error game. Someone has to do the work, deploy the resource. I mean, you could somehow look into CloudTrail, what actually happens. And based on that, you can start with the first policy, and then it might be a little bit faster than by just starting from zero every time and just adding permissions on the go. But still, as we know, CloudTrail misses lots of calls, so you will not get a 100% working solution on the first try. So yeah, I added this for a couple of resources, as you can see. I mean, you can search a little bit in the internet. There are people who did this for certain resource types, so you can come up with a list that's a bit longer than that here. So we can increase the coverage by adding those overrides. So that's kind of it. First step was getting this information into a machine readable, or it was machine readable already, but getting this into a data structure that works for me. The next step is parsing the template. So we have two different formats. We have JSON and YAML available. So parsing the JSON file is very straightforward. So I use JavaScript here, which runs on Node.js. So there's this JSON.parse method available. So that's very convenient. So this one, so it just parses a string that's JSON. What's a little bit harder is parsing YAML. And the thing that makes it harder is that CloudFormation uses this strange special types, like you can add a ref, for example, in the template, you can have a sub, and that's not standard YAML. So you need a YAML parser that actually can deal with that. So you basically need to add your own custom tags. So I found a library that supports it. It's called JS YAML. You can add your own tags, so that's why all this code is around here. It just makes sure that you can add exclamation mark, ref, sub, join, but all the functions that are supported. So that's a little bit extra work here, but it works, so nothing special. And then we basically have the code that walks through the template. It looks for the resources for each of the logical IDs. It then basically looks into this data structure that we built before. And if it can find something, great, we add it. Otherwise, we will report that we skipped it. So that's very important. So we report every resource type that we don't understand. And that's it. It just reports that. It does some calculations, so it can compute how much coverage was achieved, so how many of the resources are actually analyzed and how many were skipped. But that's nothing special. So that's what the code does. It's actually pretty simple. What I did then is I deployed this as a Lambda function. And to do this, I use the CloudFormation modules. So I have the webhook module, which basically offers a REST API connected to this single function. So that's my Lambda function. And it executes the Lambda function. And the whole website is hosted at an S3 bucket. So that's a kind of simple solution. So there's no CloudFront or stuff like that involved here, but for this demo, it's good enough. And it is actually like deploying an S3 bucket is so much faster than deploying a CloudFront distribution. So yeah, I hope you can understand that. So it saved me 30 minutes. So, and that's how the whole thing works. Yeah. So the biggest problem with my approach is that it actually is not so super useful because the coverage is very low. So as I said, around 20%. Depends a little bit on the templates you analyze, but if you use like larger templates, then you can expect that lots of the resource types are not supported. And this is actually not very helpful. So a tool that does only cover 20% of the stuff in the template is not helpful at all, because it will not work at the end. You will miss lots of permissions. So what I did is I reached out on Twitter. I said, okay, I developed this great tool. It turns CloudFormation templates into IAM permissions. Is this something that's useful for you? And lots of people said, oh yeah, that would be useful. And there was actually one comment that surprised me. And this was a comment where basically someone said that, oh, how did you do it? Because I wrote a similar tool and I used the data from the CloudFormation Registry to do it. And I was surprised because that's exactly the same approach that I did. So this guy is called Ian, and he has a couple of tools developed to make our lives a little bit easier to generate IAM policies. And the tool that he referred me to was or is the AWS Least Privilege project. So I will add this link to the chat as well. And what he does is he looks at a custom logic for resource types, and if the custom logic does not support the resource type, he looks into the registry. So he basically does it the other way around than I did. So I first look into the registry data and then I fall back to my overrides. He does it in reverse order, but this tool can do something additionally. So the tool that I prototyped only returns a list of actions. So the resource, for example, the resource level constraint always has to be star, and I add no conditions. And what Ian does is he adds resource level constraints and conditions on top of the actions. And that's actually pretty cool, and that's more powerful than what I did. So let me look at an example here. For example, this statement. So I would just add IAM pass role to the required permissions. And what he does is he adds, okay, this is actually the role that you are allowed to pass, and you are actually only allowed to pass it to the Lambda service. So that's super cool. I mean, that's at least 2 levels more sophisticated what I did. So that's why I was very happy about that tool. I think it is more powerful than what I did. I was surprised because I wasn't aware of the existence of this project. So when I like did quick research on if someone did this before, I was not able to find it. So thank you very much for pointing me into this direction. And also, I like the approach of the more clever creation of the policies. The main problem of this tool is the same that I encountered. The coverage of the resource schema is not high enough to make this really a useful tool. So that's the discovery, which is, I mean, it's not the best news in the world. I'm sorry to say that. So I think we are still looking for a solution for the problem. I haven't found it. I mean, there is kind of light at the end of the tunnel, but we kind of rely on AWS to do the work. So I think we have 2 options now. Option number 1 is we go back to what we did previously. So I will write IAM roles with policies like this, where I just whitelist the whole service that the pipeline is allowed to use. I mean, that's better than nothing, but it's not good enough. I mean, we always preach following least privilege principle. I mean, that's definitely not the end goal. So what's option 2? I think option 2 is that we step in and we will help this project a little bit with contributions and extend it with the missing resources. Because I think that's our only option at the moment. So option 3 is always there, waiting for AWS to fix the problem. But I waited for AWS a couple of times since I'm an AWS user, and this is now for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. And I can promise you, it doesn't work. It never worked so far. So if you wait for something that AWS will release, you basically wait until today. So for example, I'm still waiting for DynamoDB global support in CloudFormation. I wait for a couple of features with Aurora Serverless. It's all not yet delivered. So I think option 3 is not really an option. So we have option 1 or option 2. So yeah, if you're interested in helping this project out, let me know. Maybe we can form a little group within Cloud Plus to contribute to this project, because I think, I mean, he did all the initial work. So we should start contributing to this project instead of creating our own project. So yeah, if you're interested, maybe you can reach out to us in the community. So there is a post for this video. So maybe we have a discussion there. You can reach out to us directly if you wish. So I think that's the best option. So yeah. I hope you still liked it. I hope you still learned something. So you see, sometimes you have an idea and you're very, like, I was very energized, and I was very nervous. I was really typing and I want to get it out as fast as possible. And then I tried it out with a couple of templates, and it was actually, so, oh, that's not working. That was, oh no, the coverage is only 10% here. So yeah, that's it, what happens with ideas. So sometimes it turns out it's not a good idea. Sometimes it turns out it is actually much more work than you thought, because you have to provide all these overrides. So yeah, this is still something. I mean, I learned something, so I'm still happy with the result. I mean, you cannot always expect that a new create tool is the outcome of something like that. So yeah, I hope this also encouraged you to create tools. I mean, you don't have to create them in public, so you can start on your machine, you can try it out a little bit, and then you will see if it works or not. But still, while you're working on developing the tool, you learn new stuff. So for example, I can now fully understand how the YAML parsing works, so I can parse any YAML CloudFormation template now. I have a better understanding of this whole resource provider schema, so what data is in there. So I mean, those are all valuable things that I learned along the way. So yeah, that's it. I will keep the tool online for a couple of days, so if you want to try it out and give us feedback, feel free to do that. You can, as always, reach out to us and the community about this topic or any other topic that's related to AWS. To do so, visit community.cloudonow.io. Ask your questions, or you can also answer questions of other users. So we had a couple of discussions going on this week, so very interesting stuff around assuming a role in the UI and the session timeout. We had also a couple of questions around how to do security reviews in large-scale environments. So that's all interesting stuff, so feel free to check it out. And if you have questions, ask them. So I can promise you that both Andreas and I, we are looking forward to hear from you. So that's kind of our goal of CloudOnaut Plus. It's the community. So we want to get in touch with you, and we want to hear your questions, and we have a discussion with you. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to press the thumbs up button if you learned something new in this live event. Your feedback helps us to create relevant videos. So you can reach out to us with topic suggestions either via email. So there is a topic in the community where you can just add your ideas. So we received a couple of ideas this week. So it's super helpful to us to kind of pave the roadmap of the upcoming videos. So thanks for that. It really helps us to create relevant videos for you. And that's what we are here for, right? So we are back in 1 week. Thanks for watching, and